Hey everyone, I'm in my bedroom. Josh has the fancy setup. My office is a mess. This is ChannelBK. Thanks for tuning in. What's on repeat? Um, yeah, I feel like every time I do an intro for this, I'm always like I feel like I over explain or I'm like, hey, let's just get into it. And then I keep talking. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. That's Josh.
Hi.
You already know. He's the man, the myth, the legend. One of my besties. He's my guy. July through September. Um, we were just talking about how this is probably one of the weirder rankums because of just like how much has been going on, but then also just if this has felt the longest amount of time. But it's funny because we've done like longer stints and we've done these by 3 months, but I think this is the longest wait, it feels like. Um, but I'll say I'm happy with my list. I think Josh is happy with his list. We always try to, that's why we changed it up this year. So our lists are more confident and solid. But we're going to get into it. Joshua, for your singles, what are you repeating?
So my first single is from a duo that as of late has actually been getting quite a bit of hype, especially over on the internet. And I'm I'm here to finally kind of in a way tell the people my thoughts on this band. That is Magdalena Bay with All You Do. So this band's debut album last year, right, was very well received, was on a lot of year-end lists. I liked it. They definitely showed a really cool palette of like they have some like classic synth pop, but also like psychedelic stuff, kind of like Tame Impala, and occasionally like some kind of old school pop vibes. Um, but I did come away from that album being kind of like, yeah, that was cool, but I'm not so sure I'm in on the hype just yet. I mean, the production on that album I thought was pretty tight, and I think the songwriting generally was good too. It was just it didn't really leave as strong of an impression on me as it did on most people on the internet, but this song came out and I was like, "Oh, I'll give it a listen. I'm curious." And wow, like this is I think easily one of my absolute favorite singles of the year. It's just I mean, just the production on this thing is is incredible. I love just the acoustic guitar textures, the synths, the strings are just like chef's kiss. And I think the melodies on here are really good. Like the hook is super catchy. The way it's like, all you do is good. Like, yeah, it's a good little earworm. And uh, I feel like even the vocals on here are leaving kind of a stronger impression on me. Maybe this is the thing I came away from their last album the most is kind of with because their vocals are often kind of soft in a way. They remind me a bit of like Grimes or Poppy, which don't hate me, Grimes Stan Army, but I personally am more into Poppy myself. But yeah, the song is great, and weirdly enough, this is not from a new album or anything. It's actually on a deluxe version the band recently put out of their debut. But yeah, it's kind of one of those weird scenarios where the extra tracks end up kind of surpassing like the actual album in a way. And I definitely think they have the potential to make something great. Like, I mean, they didn't make my year end list last year, but I could see on their next album they could sort of make that leap, and I would be totally on board with them. But yes, really good song. My next single, like I always do, I'm gonna swerve to a completely different genre, from the kind of psychedelic art pop to some alternative country for my next single, which is actually from a new project or collaborative duo consisting of two kind of indie singer songwriters. The project is called Planes, and their new song is called Abilene. And this project's actually putting out a record pretty soon, like actually in a couple weeks.
Wow.
So the duo consists of Katie Crutchfield of Waxahachie fame and Jess Williamson, which, as an indie nerd, I am personally better versed in the former artist because Waxahachie's actually been a pretty big part of the indie scene for the last 10 years or so. She kind of went from like quiet, intimate singer songwriter to punchier indie rock to on her latest album, a more rootsy Americana or alternative country sound,
It
which
sounds like a little Angel Olsen trajectory in there a little bit.
oh yeah, definitely. Which that album was obviously very acclaimed. I did really like it. I mean, it was a little overrated in my opinion, but I think she really matured as a songwriter, I think really well on that album. And I also think vocally she was stunning. Like, I mean, she was already, I think, a really good singer, but she leveled up on that album. I mean, the production was good, but I kind of feel like that wasn't really the star of the show. For me, it was more just her singing and like her lyrics that really got me so much with that album. It's like a snail mail thing, which weirdly enough, both the last Waxahachie album and the last snail mail record actually share producer, Brad Cook. Um, where it's like what these albums are doing is not like revolutionary, but there's at least a solid enough vocalist and writer that can actually sell this sort of sound in a way. And yeah, that's kind of how. I mean, I personally prefer that the snail mail record. I think musically there's a lot more punch to that one, but yeah, like both these albums, I think are or these artists are kind of similar in that way. But anyway, um, Jess Williamson, the latter artist, I haven't listened to any of her stuff, even though I've definitely heard her name before. And it's funny, I'm talking about Waxahachie a lot because it's actually Jess singing on this song, but they put out two songs, and the other one has Katie singing, so they're kind of flip flopped. I just went with this one because I like both songs, but just this one is a little more immediate. And really, all I could say is just this song has, I think, really solid lyrics. Vocal harmonies are fantastic. Instrumentation's beautiful. Like the mandolin, like colors the instrumental really well. And that sort of twangy lead guitar sounds like something off the whole Jason Isbell camp, which I've actually talked on this channel about. I saw her open for Jason Isbell
I was
September
gonna. That's
September
what I was
last year.
thinking when you brought her up. I was like, oh yeah, I know Josh has seen her before.
Oh
So
yeah, the yeah. If this upcoming if this upcoming album ends up being as good as these two singles, um, we may be in for something special, and it could end up being one of the best of the year. So there you have it. Those are my singles.
hey, well that's exciting. That's how I felt when you were talking about a collab and like the singles. That kind of reminds me of obviously it's different music, but Silk Sonic.
All right.
It was kind of like the same thing. Like it was like two people we know or were associated with. They
Or
came.
like we also mentioned Big Red Machine, and it's funny, I'm thinking of how Taylor Swift had two features on there, and like one of the songs she was the lead singer, and then the other one she was just like singing harmonies, and Justin Vernon was the lead singer. Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
That kind of goes to what you were saying about your singles too, like the switch off.
Yeah.
Um, So my singles are really funny. So one of them is literally recent as the day we're shooting. So it's like the the first single is like probably like the beginning of our parameters, like July. And then the other single is literally right the day we're shooting. So I'm gonna go with the old one first. One of my favorite groups. They are back. Young Fathers with Geronimo. I'm really sad that we haven't heard too much from them since. I'm kind of like hoping that this means we may get an album before the end of the year. If not, then I'll have to sadly wait until the next year. Um, this song kind of like Lord from their last record, where it was the first song that came out from the album, and they were like, "Hey, we're finally putting out a new album. This is the first taste of it." It's one of those songs where I think when I listen to it in the context of the album, it's gonna have a different approach because it's not necessarily one of their like poppier type of songs. It's a slow burn. It's very like there's a lot of harmonies and it's very melodic.
Oh yeah,
um
I love that part in the song where it's like joy hates the thrill, and then it's like the
yeah,
that synth.
it has that like kind of low, like it feels like
And
kind of their older lo-fi stuff. I think from Cocoa Sugar it
I
was
haven't listened to that album in a little while, actually. It's been
like
a
that
little
album is a
years.
little bit more, it's kind of prettier, and there's a lot more like their second album is like poppy, but it's like gritty kind of because of it's very kind of social and stuff. And then their first record was them kind of going, it's kind of like a mainstream version of what that sound is, like in terms of the sleekness. And then Cocoa Sugar, I think, was kind of doing a bunch of different things under that vein. This song is just kind of young fathers doing what they do best. It's the verses I think are great. The approach of all three of them and how they deliver, like all three of their performances gets, like you said, it starts with that quiet kind of whisper rap thing, and then it gets to like the chorus Geronimo and like the big part of it, and then the end, get up, boom, 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 get up. Like it
Yeah, you know what's funny? I only heard the beginning of this song. So yeah, I'm just sitting
what
here kind of like, whoa.
whoa, yeah, like it's a really great build. I think lyrically it's again just it's not a song that hits you right away. Like you're not, there's other Young Father songs that you'll listen to that like like Toy, In My View, Shame. Like this is not that, but I think it's a very solid like this is Young Fathers, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go on this next record because every record of theirs is different, and it's hard to like pinpoint it because they all share a similar vibe, but like it's the little things. So we'll see. I'm excited. um Paramore. Paramore's back after 5 years. This is why is the song. um this is one of the most fascinating journeys for one of those Warp Tour bands. Like Paramore started as a Warp Tour band. They were like, making kind of this, young, rebellious pop punk. And then near kind of the middle part of their career, they were making kind of like that radio-ish poppy rock music. And then their self-titled album, I think, was them going into a more adult direction, but it still had what they're known for. And then, like a lot of bands, they transition and they start doing different things. And again, a lot of bands like this, they go a certain way. They don't go for 80s synth pop like After Laughter. So hearing that album, which I love, which is crazy. Like I love that album. And then hearing Haley's solo projects, which I wasn't as high on, but it was still cool to see her do different things. I was interested to see where they were going to go. And this record kind of just sounds like that. It's catchy, it's poppy, but it has more of this like indie rock flavor to it in the sound. I think the writing Haley is such a sharp writer. Like, I think she is so clever, and I just love the analogy. Like, the first part of this song, she's talking about, like, I think it's like opinions, and like the way she breaks it down, she's like, sometimes you can leave it or you can eat it, like eat your words. Sometimes you need to scream it. Sometimes you need to say it. Sometimes you need, like, I know I'm being like really bad explaining it, but the way she opens the song is so clever. And then the hook is just so damn catchy. Now this is an album I'm sad that doesn't come out till 2023. It doesn't come out till February, but this is a solid song. Like, this is a jam, and I am super happy that the band is back. And again, it's so fascinating to me, Paramore, where they started, where they got to, and then like where they're going and where they are. It's just such an interesting development for one of those bands.
All right, yeah, I will say, it's funny. Earlier we were just talking about like Elliott Smith and how I'm like kind of the expert and Brian's the newbie. Well, believe it or not, that's pretty much Paramore is like the other way around, where it's like, yeah, you're the one championing them, and I actually have never listened to a full Paramore album, believe it or not, but I have listened to some of Haley's solo stuff, like the 2020 album, and I only made it through the beginning of the other one because I just got kind of bored with it.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I need to, maybe this, them, and My Chemical Romance are the bands I need to do my homework with. Probably.
Yes, sir. Paramore is a very fascinating one though, because like with My Chem, they're definitely one kind of band besides Danger Days. That's definitely a different kind of thing. But Paramore started as one of these Warped Tour pop punk bands, and now like, like their last album was like 80s synth pop rock, and their self-titled album kind of sounds like it's such a fascinating journey. And I think Haley, like I said, Haley's such a smart writer. I think she's a great vocalist, and I'm really excited for this album because their transition into this more mature adult band is one of the better versions of this kind of band that I've seen. So
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Okay.
But yeah, so those are my picks. Paramore, Young Fathers. Um, None of my albums really relate that well to them. Like, none of them actually, like, so it's cool that I have 5 various kinds of albums. I guess one of them kind of is similar because of the lo-fi-ness, but that'll be the last album I talk about. Um, an album that you and well, I know you like all these albums, but I know an album that you listen to, and you're messaging me and you're going, Brian, I don't know. And I was like, are you sure? Like, I think this is pretty damn awesome. And then you went back and listened and you're like, you know what? I gave it a second chance, and you're right. Hellfire by Black Midi.
Yeah.
They're back. They already came back with another album. Uh Going into this album, we kind of knew what to expect because they were very open about how it's a combination of the aggressiveness of their first record and the melodic structure of their second. And I still think Cavalcade is like this much better. I
Yes,
like
I
it like
agree.
that because I think this record is awesome. I think their last album had a little bit more breathing room. Like, it didn't
Yes.
as like chaotic as this, but god damn, this album, like, it is what they said it was. Like, it's the sound, like, and I've gone on many times saying Black Midi's great. Their first album's not terrible. Like, I was fine with it. It wasn't bad, but it just was not, it didn't click with me. And then their second album, I was like, this is really good. They're doing these very long songs. They're keeping my attention, but the intensity's there. So
Oh
then they're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no,
It's
we're going to
funny.
give you
Like,
the intensity of the first album, but we're going to make it beautiful, like Sugar Zoo. where it's like all mysterious and then just
yeah.
like
Yeah. It's funny that like their last album, like the same album that has John L, actually has like slower, more eerie stuff, like Diamond stuff on it and stuff like that, which I'd say still is probably the closest this album comes to that sort of thing, where it's like dreamy, but it has all these great parts to it, and then at the end you're just like, eh, eh.
well, because the second half is kind of the part of the album where it's not like all just slow, but the first half is very much like, and then especially like Eat Man Eat, like that song is like scary. Like his delivery on it too, it's just eat man eat, but don't eat man eat, but don't like it's they said this is what the record was gonna be, and I was very just like, I mean, yeah, they were right, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd say this is like, you know, this album is like they've reached this new level of demented that now it makes their other couple albums look kind of like, like look more normal, and then this one's just like, yeah, this is like a freaky like experimental rock circus they've got going on here.
yeah, like it's as a like, okay, so as like a album that I'll listen to more, I do think their second album is that, because I do think on this album there's a lot where like I think just as a visceral experience you're kind of just like, it's cool to listen to. Like Sugar Zoo, like that song is great, and I think it's one of the best singles of the year, but I don't know if that's a song that I just put on, because like John L is intense, but it like I was telling you, there's kind of a breathing to it, like where it's like it's intense, but it's like like it's a jam, whereas this song you're just kind of like and you're just like, huh, what, okay, I'm bobbing my head, what. So but no, I really love this album. It's, Black Midi, like I said, their first album I was like, it's okay, but then these last two records have been awesome.
Oh
um
yeah, I kind of feel like this feels like a clipping situation to me, where like, yeah, clipping actually similarly, like their last album was slower and in a way bootier, but then like,
oh, you did say this after, because after you told me you changed your
and
mind.
then the second one was like, it was more in your face, and oddly enough was like even like scarier than the previous album,
Yeah,
uh which obviously, given that they went the horror direction, that makes sense.
yeah, no, because I remember you saying that too, and I mean I can kind of see the similarities, because I do really like the singles on the last one, and I think this one has a complete album. um but yeah, I mean, Black Midi's great. Shout out to them. They're
These two bands need to tour together. That shit would be insane. Yeah, Black Midi and
Black
Clipping.
Midi. I saw Black Midi's touring with Black Country New Road, and I'm like, how are they not coming to Detroit? I was pissed. I'm like, that's a lineup. Like, that's the obvious lineup. Soon. Maybe they'll go to your neck of the woods, and then I'll find an excuse to come out there and we'll see Black Midi and Black Country together. That'd be
Yep.
fun.
All right.
But another record that you and I both love, and as both parts of this record I think are like top tier, and that is probably, well, no, it's not my top of this, but one of my top rap albums of the year. Danger Mouse, Black Thought, Cheat Codes. Black Thought, legendary MC of the Roots. Danger Mouse, legendary producer.
Yep.
I'm not a big Danger Mouse guy. I
Yeah,
say
I
a
me
lot of
neither.
the Danger Mouse stuff that I've listened to is not like hip hop. It's a lot of the rock bands that he's
Oh
produced.
yeah, the same here.
So like when it
He
comes to
actually,
that,
believe it or not, produced Parquet Quartz Wide Awake, believe it or not.
that is so interesting, because I kind of feel like his production for rock bands is kind of like mid. Like I'm not, and like there's a lot of stuff he's done that I've liked. Because I
Definitely
know
not the case for Parquet Courts, though. That's for sure.
no, that is yeah, not at all. And then obviously Gnarls Barkley, he's done stuff for Gorillas. Like there's stuff that he's done that's great, but god damn, this fucking album is like Black Thought is like we all know Black Thought. He's like one of the goats. We know. Like he's one of the top guys. These beats though are clunky. They're tough. They are vibrant. Like the self-titled track. When I first started listening to this album, when it got to that, I kept repeating that song because I'm like, this fucking beat is fucking awesome. Bum 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 bum
Like that the little part at the end. Yeah, it's sounds demented, kind of like the Black MIDI.
We got the streets flooding out here like Puerto Rico. You get McNabb like Donovan, it's finito. I'm like, and just the way he goes off on these beats, and then Strangers, which is like obviously one of the talked about tracks. Run the Jewels, killed it. ASAP Rocky, killed it. I was so happy because you see those four and you think, what are they gonna bring? And ASAP does what ASAP does, and then the beat is just pum, 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 pum.
Ooh, 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 ha.
It's
Oh, and yeah, don't even get me started on No Gold Teeth, just the bum bum bum.
that that I'm trying to think of that kind like that sounds maybe it does sound like him. That sounded like a Madlib beat. Like that sounded like some shit that like MF Doom would go on. Or like there was someone else that I was thinking about with that beat. That beat came on and I was like, holy shit. Like I could see so many people on this beat. Like it's crazy. But this is just one of those records where here's the thing. I don't really tend to like records like this. Not like hate them, but a lot of times these kind of rapidy rap albums, whatever. But here's the thing. Also, Black Thought I know is not that kind of rapper. But this fucking album, like, it's just to me, hip hop, like when you have a top tier MC, that should be enough. The fact that these beats go as hard as they do, though, and then the fact, like, this makes me go, okay, Danger Mouse, like, I forgive you for because, like, I've never, like I said, I've
Oh
never.
yeah, he produced Turn Blue, and I don't even want to talk about that album.
And then I know he did the second album Josh Klinghoffer was on for Red Hot Chili Peppers. Even though I liked it better than Unlimited Love, again, like he kind of flattens out a lot of these
or
rock.
like he did Broken Bells. Yeah, like I think they're just fine to me.
Yeah. Yeah, but like fuck Danger Mouse. I'll give you your props here because you killed it. Like you were awesome. But yeah, I could talk about that album forever. The final album, which I was really excited about. I know Josh and I are kind of like we're kind of like two of some of the rare people that talk about music that are like kind of high on these guys, and it's Preoccupations. As Josh said, I think
Arrangements, that's the name of the album.
Arrangements is the name of the album. I was gonna say my favorite part was I loved how Josh said he said this album was really great. If I had to really say anything that bad is I thought the album name was really uninspired and boring. And I go, you kind of right.
Yeah, like their album titles, are kind of like underwhelming, even if they accurately like describe the album, because it totally made sense. Their last one was called New Material for sure.
They're simple, post-punk group, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They just get straight to it. This is great. Like it's catchier. It's like a catchier version of what their self-titled album was. Now, when I say that, am I trying to say this album is like super accessible to like normal people? No, like I do, like even on Ricochet, that song is really catchy, but there is still kind of that post-punkiness on it where like some people might be turned off by it, but it's still the bow, 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 ricochet. Like it's still catchy and the songwriting's great. Like I know you and I agreed about new material. I don't think the album was like trash, but it was definitely like eh. This album, I think, besides Recalibrate, I believe, Recalibrate, I think, kind of starts a little slow, but then it picks up. But that was really the only thing on the
That
album.
song has actually grown on me over time. Like the first 2 minutes of that song are like, this is what their last album tried to do, but oh god, like maybe it's just the way it blends with the vocals. They work better with this sound than whatever the hey yeah that like whatever that weird inflection he was doing on Espionage.
Yeah. Well, and like and the one thing too on this record is it's when you have a record that's 7 songs long, which I know we learned from the whole Kanye run when he did all those albums. You're like, you gotta hit. You gotta hit. And I'm gonna be honest, all 3 of those singles leading up to this, every time I heard one of them, I was like, these are getting better and better. Holy shit, like are they gonna do it? And then when Fixed Bayonets comes on, I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, this is one of those albums where I don't go to Preoccupations for like they're not this group that's like I relate to their lyrics or any of this sort of stuff. I just love the sound that they do, and I just think when they're on top of it, they make catchy but also really dark post-punk. And it's like it kind of reminds me of like an Ice Age situation where like when Ice Age is on their game, like they make really dark and menacing stuff, but like a lot of times it can be really catchy and the songwriting can be really well done. And I don't know, like I said, I think this record, like I love their I was into their debut when they were Viet Cong, and then I was really into their real self-titled album. New material was like, eh. This record put them back. So
Yes.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
I was a big fan of it, and
Oh yeah, it's definitely an album that has grown on me over time. I mean, do I think they could take things even further sonically? Sure, but yeah, I think, for an album that's literally 7 tracks and all of them are kind of long, like they find really great ways to keep your attention for sure.
love all the stuff that I've been listening to these last couple months. I feel like I was happy this time around. I was kind of like, I'm good on this. I'm good on this, especially Cheat Codes. I was like, I felt so bad because you had it on your list. Then when I finally listened to it, I was like, sorry, Josh, I'm gonna put Cheat Codes. And you're like, that's okay. I'll put on 3 new albums or a new album. So but
Yeah,
yeah,
because I know one album on my list has remained on there all this time, and
that's true.
it makes sense we're transitioning into that first because it's the one that my co-host has opinions on. Like this is kind of the reverse of the last episode where like the first 2 were ones I it was basically just me on them, and then my last album you had thoughts on, and then on your 3 I had things to say. It's kind of spoiler. There's kind of going to be a bit of a reverse going on with this episode.
It's been a lot of craziness. I got a sinus infection, and then I was out of town, and then I was trying to catch up for another video we'll be doing. So it was kind of like, don't worry, I'm gonna listen to the albums that I can listen to, and if I don't get around to it, then I will let you know. But I do have a lot of stuff that you recommended. So
Okay, so my first album, I think legit, probably maybe my number 1 rock album this year so far. And that is Leave Society Be a Monkey. Leave Society Be a Monkey. Hey, Cave World by Viagra Boys. I think Brian and I, it's funny we're coming off of Preoccupations and into this album because we're kind of in tune with each other when it comes to this band because their last album was fine, and I think they definitely showed a kind of unique identity that set them apart from, because last year, right, was like that was a big year for, the post-punk bands. And I didn't, outside of people like Anthony, I didn't hear too many people talk about the Viagra Boys album, which in a way I get it, considering I wasn't all that nuts about that album myself. But then I heard the singles leading up to this album, and I was like, oh, I actually really dig these. I'm curious what the album's going to sound like. And yeah, I remember messaging you the first time I listened to this, being like, I didn't think it would happen, but I think Viagra Boys put out a pretty kick ass album. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Very
like
unique. Very much like you were saying. Again,
this
their
and
last
Black
record
Midi.
was fine. And I think a lot of it was, it just felt very dry to me. When I was listening to this record, I was hearing some of the shit that they had on here, and I was like, where was this? Like, and again, I'm speaking ignorantly because I've only really listened to their last album. But I was
Same.
like, wait a minute. This sounds like a completely different group. Like, I was like, okay, let's go. Like, like, again, like kind of with Preoccupations, it's weirdly experimental, but it's catchy and it gets stuck. Like, it's like earworm music. Like, it's really cool.
Oh yeah, and another thing I love about this album is how they have all these different stories throughout the album that, like, it seems like some of these stories wouldn't belong on one album, but yet there's still like a common thread to all of them that kind of makes them make sense. Like Baby Criminal is a phenomenal opener. I love the energy to it and how it's fun, but it also has these like super dark lyrics too. And yeah, mind blowing intro to the album. Um, Troglodyte, I think, has this great sort of funkiness to it, and yeah, it's smartly written and it's catchy. Um, Now, Creepy Crawlers is a song that when I first heard it, I kind of rolled my eyes at it a little bit because the song is, it's definitely very satirical in terms of how it's written, and it's like this spoken word that's very manic, put over top of this chaotic post punk with lots of synths in it, and the sax just going like in the background. But yeah, it's like it's a really clever song, but yet it's kind of depressing when you really think about it. You're like, oh, people actually believe this shit. Like, yeah, it's crazy. Now, Ain't No Thief, dude. I'm telling you, the moment I first hit play and I heard that riff, I was like, what the hell? Like, I was lukewarm on this band's last album, but they just dropped a banger. Like, it's legit, I think, probably my favorite rock single of the year so far. Like, it's just, I love how it's written about a guy who's obviously accused of stealing such ordinary objects, but it's delivered in a way that's kind of menacing and like, yeah, it has this whole like, I don't give a shit kind of vibe to it that, woo, the song is bananas. Now, Big Boy, I would say, is the only track on here I'm a little bit on the fence with. I mean, I love how bluesy it sounds, and I think I just love how it's the mix on this song is like really lo-fi, but in a way that works. I mean, the vocals are mixed like big boy baby, I got problems with my insecurities. Like, yeah, and the chorus is like big boy, big boy. But like, what is Jason Williamson doing at the end of the song? Like, yeah, it's weird this year. He's like landing kind of out of place features. I mean, he makes more sense in this context than he did like on the Alex Cameron album, given Sleaford Mods. I may not have listened to them, but they definitely do this whole post punk thing too. But it's just like, yeah, he sounds just kind of lazy. It's like, is the microphone on? There's beach buds on telly, like all this stuff. but I think the album ends super strong. ADD is incredibly catchy, and I love how it's probably the most accessible thing they've ever made, but it's still like has their whole vibe to it. And then Return to Monkey, which obviously inspired that really iconic transition, is probably the most unhinged they've ever sounded. And I love the way all the themes throughout the record come to a head on the song. And it's like, even though I've been going back to this record a lot and I'm well familiar with it, I still listen to it a lot now because like I I discover something new and insane with every listen that I didn't really uh get before. Uh, and yeah, just the this album's amazing, and I definitely am now I'm finally convinced that what this band is doing is actually kind of genius. So yes, Cave World, go listen to it. It's awesome. Um Now my next album, you think my first album was a bit of a surprise? Well, you haven't seen nothing yet because my next album is actually the solo debut of the front man of a band that I
I
have
was
not.
I was confused. You said that, and I was like, wait, I thought this was the one record, and then you're like, oh wait.
Yeah, but yeah, like it's from the front man of a band that I haven't been very warm to, but this album, it may not be necessarily like amazing to me, but I have been going back to it a lot because it's easily hands down. I think this artist has ever clicked with me, and that is the self-titled Marcus Mumford album. So I heard about some of the people involved with this record and how he was gonna be like very like raw and personal on here, and I'm like, okay, I'll add it to my list. And I will make one thing clear. My slander of Mumford and Sons never really had anything to do with Marcus Mumford because I don't think he's like a bad songwriter, and I actually think he's like a really good singer. He is definitely talented, but what bothered me about that band was just how they sounded like just a really corny, like Game of Thrones cosplay.
It was kind of vanilla. Like their first two records were definitely they were good for what they are, but it was definitely like it was vanilla of what it was. And then when they went electric, it was kind of like
mm,
it sounds more boring, which is crazy.
yeah, but yeah, like I definitely, was like, I definitely really like their front man, and yeah, he seems cool, but like, yeah, I don't want him over top of like overbearing banjo lines or anything. Uh, but this album, it's definitely different from what he's done with Mumford and Sons. It's definitely very stripped back, and I think Blake Mills provides really great textures throughout the album. Like, for example, the song Grace, the way that guitar is just like, and the piano is just like dun 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 dun, like on there, and vocally, I think he sounds great on there. Cannibal was a great opener. That song is like, it's right out of the gate. He's like hitting you with lyrics about like personal trauma he's been through, and you're just like, whoa, like way to give me a give me a wallop to the face right on track one. Like it starts out very intimate and quiet, but then it kind of reminds me a bit of like the build of a of some Mumford and Son songs. Like the first song from their first album, for example, started out kind of quiet, but then it had like big grand outro at the end. This song is kind of like that. And I think Better Off High, I think, is another track where it's slow, but it has like great attention to detail to the production, and it's just so well written. It's like simple, but yet pulled off in a way that's very effective. Like it kind of reminds me a bit of like Laura Marling in terms of like the way it sounds, it's very rustic, and also the way it's written is very personal, and it's like not doing anything revolutionary. It's just good singer-songwriter music. And then the features on this thing, like, believe it or not, I actually kind of liked Claro on Dangerous Game. I mean, she's about as soft spoken and awkward as you would expect, but she sounds weirdly a little more passionate and kind of eerie in that context than she did like her entire last album. I would say the album kind of loses steam a little bit in the second half. Like Better Angels, I think is like okay, and then Going Light just kind of sounds like a kind of a lesser Bon Iver knockoff where it's like um it's folky but it has kind of electronic textures to it. But like the thing that kind of bothers me about the song is how Monica Martin, the featured singer, is way more upfront on this mix than like Mumford is. So it kind of weirdly feels like her song, and like him just kind of in the background, even though she killed it on the vocals. But I think the last two songs are incredible. I'm wearing her shirt right now. My bestie Phoebe is on Stonecatcher, and I don't want to be biased, but that may be my favorite song on here. It's just I love the progression of the instrumentation and the writing. Like this really feels like the moment where he's really recovered from what he's been through and he's like come out on the other side. And that point in the chorus when the two of them just like soar, it's incredible. And then like the last song, which is a duet with Brandy Carlisle, that's fantastic too. It finishes off the album on a pretty fitting note lyrically, and I think the two of them just sound great together on here. And yeah, it's just, but yeah, 2022 has been a pretty wild year. There's a lot of artists this year actually kind of surprising me with some of their stuff a little bit. And yeah, that this is definitely among the biggest. I mean, it's not going to be like super high on my list. It's probably going to be like in kind of the 40s range when I get to doing that list, but still, I this is easily the most I've really ever enjoyed something Marcus has done. And yeah, this is just how I would prefer to hear his song. So there you have it. If you're reading this, Marcus Mumford, I'm sorry I've savaged your band for years, but I think you put out a solid album. Okay, final album, which those two kind of got me a little excited in some way. This one, even though this last one I do think like better than the Marcus Mumford, it definitely is a little more like just chill. And it's a solo debut from one of the most vital producers in the hip hop game right now, Kenny Beats with Louis. Um, so we've been following Kenny for a little while. There's like, yeah, there's a lot of artists he's worked with, like some of the best in like basically any kind of genre. Like he's not just strictly hip hop. He's also done stuff with more kind of singer songwriter artists like Dominic Fike or Remy Wolf,
And
some
he's
of
done
which
stuff
actually get
Untitled.
sampled on here. Um, and but I definitely didn't expect we'd get a full like instrumental beat project from him, but he that's what he gave us this year. And you know what? It's great. Like it's just I love how meticulous he is with how he layers these instrumentals and like pulls all these samples into like his sound. Like and I also love how he kind of takes little vocal snippets from like people he's worked with and like lays them on top of songs. Like Still, for example, has like JPEG Mafia ad libs as well as Omar Apollo doing like vocal harmonies, and they're just so well incorporated over top of that like kind of luxurious soul sample, which has kind of a an early Kanye vibe to it. And then there's also a Family Tree where like we have Slow Tie being sampled on there, and that's actually one of my favorite tracks on here, not just because of the way that sample is brought in, but also just the moment when he brings in that guitar. Like the track already has a pretty sick groove, but it's just the moment he has to like in the beat. It's just the vibe. And for like some of my other favorite tracks on here, I really like Parenthesis. It just has a great, just sort of like like yeah, and the song War has this interesting kind of like jazziness to it. It's just like and like and then Eternal, I love how he brings in those vocal samples and they're just like we live forever, and he like applies a bit of like reverb over top of like that piano, and that just sort of like very comfortable sounding beat. um and Drop 10 has a fun little catchiness to it, just the whole just a misdemeanor, you loved her from the start, like yeah. And I do think if there are some tracks on here that I was just kind of on, I would say Get Around, The Perch, and That Third Thing are the three tracks that I think are cool while they're on, but they don't captivate me as much as other songs. But I think the last two songs end it really strong. Like Rotten is really smooth, but also haunting. And then Hot Hand is just a fun little kind of hype track to end things on. And not only is like the production and just how precise the mix is, but also it also kind of doubles as sort of a love letter to his father too, which is where the album gets its name from. And you can actually hear throughout the album of like him as a child, like kind of interacting with his father. And then like the first song on here is like him kind of like talking to his father as well, like that. And I'd say all of this album reminds me a bit of like Jay Dilla's Donuts, which obviously iconic album where it's like it's got really creative samples and it's kind of all over the place sonically, but it's also like emotional. And it because like in the case of Donuts, he was like on his deathbed making some of the most just insane beats ever recorded. Obviously, this is maybe not quite as like morbid, but like it definitely there's similarities there. And I definitely think instrumental hip hop is a kind of sound where I don't always love it, but like when it's done this well, that's something special. Like yeah, so yes, which is why you know, albums like say Introducing by DJ Shadow, which was actually a classic album I talked on here at the end of December, and like Donuts, like these are all kind of iconic, like very revolutionary albums, which obviously Louis is not one of those albums, but it definitely is. It's easily, I think, the instrumental hip hop beat album to beat this year, really. So yes, um, really, really solid album there.
Well, there you go, people. You got, every time we finish one of these videos, the first thing I want to say is you need to go listen to all that because clearly, we're bringing you some good stuff. I need to go listen to some of your stuff too. But yeah, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want to see what we've talked about this year, or previous years, whatever, like if you want to, that's fine. I guess you don't have to, but we've been doing this. It's been a while now. It's been over 2 years. So go check all that out. Check out Josh's channel as usual. He has some great stuff on there. his own album reviews and his interviews and all that sort of good stuff. And then as well as my channel here, because as well as, excuse me, this show, I do classic reviews myself, and
we do rank them.
And we do rank them. Sometimes there are some album ones. My good friend Eric and I did My Chemical Romance songs. I know Josh and I did Kendrick Lamar albums.
And Radiohead.
And oh yeah, that's an old rank 'em. That's an Us and Our Friends.
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
My gosh, that took me back there. My goodness. But yeah, and we are gonna be doing a rank 'em soon. Yes. I feel stupid because I don't think we mentioned what it is, but we're not.
Yeah, I think we did kind of in passing at the end of the last episode, but yes, we're ranking Elliott Smith albums.
Well, there you go. So if you didn't know, or if I felt like we didn't say it, then there you go. But yeah, so check that out. That will be coming out soon after this video comes out. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Josh, thank you once again. It's been great.
Yeah.
Per usual. And then yeah, I don't know. Thank you for tuning into ChannelBK. Peace out, everybody.